Welcome back, trainers, to our Collectors Emporium Mega Cup. We're here in top four. I'm Tyson, joined here by Chuppa, and three new additions, there's a medal here too. There's like a couple new additions to our table. But as you can see here, these are the prizes for today's tournament. Some lovely trophies and medals for all of top 8. But what a fun day of Pokemon so far, and what even better way to end it off with a top cut standings graphic here as we have our top 4. So we have Hario versus Luca and Corey versus Seung.
Yeah, Hyro versus Luca, that is going to be the second match that we'll highlight. Don't think we've seen those players go head-to-head yet. And then Corey versus Sung Lee is actually going to be a rerun of the finals of the last cup that happened here at CE, I believe. So that'll be the first match that we'll highlight when we have those players ready on stream. Should be very exciting. Corey, known for using that very standard Terrapagos team that we saw him get a pretty decisive win with earlier in the tournament.
And not only known for it, but really well played with it, apparently, going 6-0 in today's cup. All the other players in our top 4 here went 4-2 with their records. Corey's the only one who's undefeated currently at the moment, so really showing a mastery of this Terrapagos. And, I mean, we got to see it earlier on stream, was very, very well played. Just positioning around that substitute, knowing how your team works, knowing the damage rolls, knowing what needs to be where and when, and what needs to do damage. All those, come into factor when building and playing a team well, and Corey has done that amazing job of that with Terrapagos today.
I think Corey might actually have a taller order in front of him this time, being able to go up against not a Cali Ice team, which, I think Terrapagos in general does fine against, probably not much better or worse than average. Koraidon, on the other hand, one of those two very strong fighting type restricteds in the format that when Terra Shell is not active are going to be able to hit Terrapagos with those super effective moves. So I definitely can see this being a little bit more uphill for Corey. However, I'm sure his team is definitely going to give him some tools to deal with that Koraidon. One of the most important of which just being that one-time activation a game, Terraform Zero, to just clear any weather that the Koraidon would be relying on.
Just making sure you get the correct turn to clear the weather so that the Koraidon doesn't have a chance to swap out for free and come back in is going to be very important for Corey to kind of click. And that's the real challenge of when you're playing Terrapagos, is deciding when you want to let go of that shell that allows you to live one of those hits and makes it non-effective. And then getting rid of that, and also choosing when you want to get rid of weather, balancing those two, and then also when your single target moves become spread, choosing when you get to click that or what you want to click it on is very, very important, because the damages also vary from that.
Yeah, and I know last game, one thing that we noticed with Terrapagos was its damage in that matchup wasn't the absolute highest. I think in this case, Sung's team is probably a little bit frailer than the last player that we saw Corey go up against. So maybe even after one Calm Mind, that Terrapagos is going to be a little bit more of an offensive threat here. Really interested to see how this plays out. I can't say that I've seen a Terrapagos go up against a Koraidon too recently. So just exciting to see two of these very standard teams of the late format go up against one another.
Absolutely, and I think Brute Bonnet, even with something like the Spore, could be very dangerous with considering how fast it is. It's not an Amoonguss. Brute Bonnet actually has a little bit of speed to it. And if this Terrapagos just doesn't have that much speed in it at all, we can actually see maybe the Brute Bonnet outspeeding it if it is faster. With something of a Covert Claw, that would make a lot of sense. You're not getting faked out. You're moving a little bit faster, able to put some mid-tier speed Pokemon to sleep. But we see here from the leads of Corey leading the Ogre Pond, Cornerstone, and the Terrapagos. And from Seung here, we have the Koraidon and the Iron Crown.
Wow, this seems like a really, I'd say somewhat commanding lead from Seung. I feel like he's just found exactly the right offensive Pokemon for the job right now. Sure, Ogerpon can redirect hits from Terrapagos, but it's only going to be able to do it for so long here before the Koraidon and the Crown are kind of able to overwhelm. It's not like there's any pressure on Sung's side to turn his Pokemon into a Terra type and end up becoming weak to that potential Terra Starstorm from the Terrapagos. Looks like we're just going to see a safe Spiky Shield from Ogerpon and a Collision Course going in. Oop, nope, Collision Course into Terrapagos instead.
And this makes a lot of sense. Spiky Shield Bear from Corey not wanting to get hit by a combination of these moves. Tachyon Cutter actually being super effective against something like the Ogerpon, which would have been really dangerous. Also breaking through that sturdy. So actually going for a Calm Mind there, ignoring the Ogerpon, realizing it's not able to do anything back to you. and just breaking the shield on the Terapagos is a great first step here for Seung.
Yeah, that was a really substantial turn for Seung, kind of just realizing, like, the Ogerpon's kind of out of position here. It cannot even hit either of my Pokemon for better than resisted damage. I don't care that much if it goes for Follow Me. Let me take this opportunity to break Terra Shell and then set up with my Iron Crown. I think one thing that's a little bit awkward for Seung here is he'd love to just use the Tachyon Cutter to deal with the Ogerpon in one hit. The problem is the Ogerpon is still going to be able to waste a Koraidon attack in the meantime. It's not like your Koraidon really has to get off the field. Ooh, it looks like he might actually be considering a swap out for Koraidon, which I guess makes sense. I feel like if you leave it in, you are somewhat likely to get hit by a Starstorm here, and that's something that you can kind of avoid. So maybe deciding, you know, I do want to use my fighting type to fight your turtle later in the game, and kind of take advantage of this like unique ability for Iron Crown to get a one-shot on the Ogerpon through Sturdy.
I think very uniquely as well, you would actually maybe consider keeping the Root Bonnet alive, but recognizing that you can't bring in the Indeedee for the same reason you can't bring in the Koraidon, because if that Terapagos does Terrasilize, it's going to get rid of that Psychic Train and the Weather. So both of those are what you kind of need for Seung here to do any sort of meaningful damage. Incineroar switching in for Corey, though, on that Tachyon Cutter, able to eat it. Not too well, actually. That's
yeah, no,
that's
a good job, Iron Crown. Deserve an award for that. Wow, Corey making a really good call that Seung was going to keep that Koraidon in the back pocket. Like, Collision Course going into literally either of these Pokemon would have been colossal for Seung here. But because he chose to play it a bit safer with the Brute Bonnet swap, Corey's kind of capitalized on it, and now it's like Incin has a relatively good defensive position. Terapagos got up that substitute at relatively low cost. I think things are starting to turn around a little bit for Corey now based off of that turn.
Unfortunately, though, with Terapagos, you do have to Terrasilize it to do any meaningful damage to this Iron Crown. Otherwise, you're going to be doing a resisted amount of damage to this Iron Crown with your Starstorm, unless you Terrasilize. Ogerpon switching back in for the Incineroar, and another calm behind for this Iron Crown. We saw it do half to the Incineroar, so if Incineroar comes again, it's going to get knocked out by this Tachyon Cutter. Starstorm, though, into the Brute Bonnet. I'm really interested in how much this +1 is going to do. About half to Brute Bonnet.
Then you were saying this guy doesn't do big damage before he Terras. Ooh, and the Spore coming in on the Incin slot. I think something that's really interesting about Incin and, like, you know, past the start of really early Regulation G is a lot of them are running the Rocky Helmet set. And it just means that Incin actually has to worry so much more about its matchup against Pokemon like Brute Bonnet and Amoonguss if it's not willing to commit something like a Flare Blitz or a Taunt to deal with them. And in this case, like we just saw, the Incineroar kind of just felt pressured to leave the field in front of Iron Crown.
Absolutely, and with something the Ogerpon and the Incineroar are weaving in and out, yes, the pressure of Tachyon Cutter is on the field, but you can go for another spiky shield like Corey is here and just weave in those extra turns for Terapagos to do something. You got a Calm Mind, you got a Substitute, and with the +1 special defense, let's see if it's enough.
Ooh, the break at 1.
Yeah,
wow.
The break at 1 there with the Tachyon Cutter is very, very big and able to do so much damage to that Terapagos.
Iron Crown is not playing around. Wow. It just goes to show you how strong this set is that combines like Calm Mind and the Booster Energy special attack on Iron Crown on top of like Tachyon Cutter's a strong move, like 50 twice. He's not playing around.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that about Tachyon Cutter as well. And not only is it a double hitting move, it's an 100% double hitting move that guarantees you're able to get it off. And with something like the Indeedee here, I mean, Corey is getting into the HP range where you kind of have to Terrasilize your Terapagos to make sure you live the turn from whatever combination of attacks. Maybe not Koraidon. If you turn off the Sun, actually, with the Bold, maybe. But Indeedee could be the Pokemon of choice here, as you can go for an Expanding Force or even just another Tachyon Cutter, knowing you can KO something like the Incineroar even on such a...
I feel like the terror from the turtle is like almost so telegraphed at this point that you hardly want to go for the Expanding Force. I think it's like definitely something that Seung could think about doing. If you connect an Expanding Force here, you are extremely happy about it. I think kind of thinking about the other set that Seung played, this is another good opportunity to just go on the offensive with your Indeedee. I don't think there's like too much reason not to throw out a Psychic here for a little bit of extra damage. It's not like Indeedee could have done anything to protect from this Ivy Cudgel, doing pretty substantial damage. Ogerpon giving up its life, but I don't think that is a huge surprise.
I mean, we saw Incineroar take 50% from this +2 plus the booster energies on the Incineroar from the Tachyon Cutter on the Iron Crown. So I'm really interested to see if Urshifu is the last Pokemon for Corey, how much that Pokemon's going to take as a resisted hit.
Yeah, let's see. So Corey does have that one unrevealed Pokemon in the back. In the unsung side, we know that there's a Cridon in the back. I think it looks like Sun might have just expired. So whenever Cridon comes out again, it is going to have like fresh Sun to work with. I think Urshifu in the back isn't such a bad guess. What else could Corey have that could change the tide of the battle? I think like Fluttermane could be a pretty powerful pick here with like Thunderwave or Moonblast. Like all of Thunderwave, Moonblast, and Shadow Ball seem appealing here.
Absolutely, but what I think is even more important is a huge play that Corey can make here is actually terastallize the Terapagos and go for Fake Out with Incineroar, removing that Psychic Terrain and allowing you to go for a Fake Out into something like the Iron Crown, stopping it from moving his turn and getting an extra turn of value, and you can fire off a huge Starstorm to potentially knock out the Indeedee and do a decent amount to Iron Crown.
Yeah, this could be a really big leg up for Corey if Seung does not see it coming, or if Seung reads him trying to, maybe go for something like a substitute instead. He goes on the offensive. It is going to be the Fake Out with the newly cleared Psychic Trade, leaving Terapagos wide open, doesn't have to worry about any Tachyon Cutter. I was about to say here comes a Starstorm, but here comes a substitute. I think this makes a lot of sense, just like kind of taking advantage of the dead turn, maybe saying like, oh, I think the Iron Crown, maybe it's going to protect, maybe it's not. Substitute is just like a pretty reliable option for him here.
And now if you're Corey, you've kind of conditioned Seung to say that, okay, well now you're going to protect for another turn of leftovers. So now it's like, okay, well do I just Tachyon Cutter into the Terapagos to remove the substitute? I know I removed the substitute with one, so I could get a knockout in the Terapagos, but if it protects, it's kind of a dead turn, and then Incineroar I have to deal with. So you really have to pick and choose what slot you're Tachyon Cuttering.
Ooh.
And Indeedee actually goes for a follow me here.
I'm a little surprised to see the Tachyon Cutter into the Turtle here. Like, I don't think this is going to get a knockout quite yet. Compared to the Incin, which I think based on the damage we've seen from +1, I think Incin would have gone down if it stayed in. Let's see how much this does to the Turtle. Not quite a knockout.
Close. Yeah, unfortunately, with that terastallization, Terapagos becomes a whole nother beast and gains a ton of HP, I should say. And the Starstorm there, ignoring the redirection, not able to knock out the Indeedee. And
wait, that Starstorm did nothing. I thought that guy was at +1.
He is, but remember, the single target damage is way more than the spread damage. With the Stellar terastallization, you're the way the math works out, single target Starstorm is usually stronger on average.
How did that do so little? I feel like I must be missing something.
That's just the Terapagos diff, unfortunately.
Well, what's even the pressure to attack the Terapagos if it's doing like 25%? Wow.
I mean, if you get rid of it, it's not doing chip damage, it's not ignoring your follow me. I mean, it's in such a range now that it's no longer really a threat. Yes, you don't have Psychic Terrain anymore to go for a safe Expanding Force and to guarantee the Terapagos if you had something like the Ogre Pond, but with both of these Pokemon at nearly full HP, the Crawdon at full HP, Incineroar can switch out all at once to reset that.
Is this going to be a Flutter? Yeah, it's Flutter.
Oh, it's Flutter.
So Seung actually made a really great play, not falling for the bait of doing a fighting type move on the Incineroar, knowing if you can get rid of the Incineroar with the Steel move and the Incin is the Pokemon that you think might swap out, Seung correctly went for a Tachyon at that slot. This Fluttermane is not long for this world, kind of just going for the Collision Course to address the Turtle instead of, the Incin might seem tempting, but if Tachyon Cutter can do the job, just use the Tachyon Cutter if it's also covering for the swap. Flutter not even living to see one of those.
And it's crazy, too, because we know Tachyon Cutter, it's not even a risky play, even, because we know Tachyon Cutter would have been able to knock out that Incineroar. Considering it did, I'm still baffled. Like, you're baffled at the Terapagos damage. I'm baffled at this Tachyon Cutter damage. And then 50% to this Incineroar, which is absolutely astonishing to me. And, of course, the Incineroar does come back in here, resetting that Fake Out, allowing these Terapagos to get another turn to do what it would like, but not enough HP to set up a substitute and not enough turns to set up a Calm Mind, that's for sure.
Yeah, we also have to remember, this Incin set is like Fake Out, Parting Shot, Wisp, Knockoff. It's not really capable of doing much damage here, so if you're Seung, I don't think there's anything in the world stopping you from just spamming attacks on this Turtle right now.
And the Turtle spam attacks he does. The Koraidon is going to go for a Collision Course into Corey's Terapagos, taking it down finally. The Beast who's been on the field forever. And now it's Incineroar versus the world. Let's see. The Iron Crown does flinch. I just want to see the Iron Crown take the KO. I would just protect Koraidon here. I want to see if Tachyon Cutter can get the knockout on the Incineroar.
No, looks like Koraidon's going to steal the glory. I'm with you. I think I'm wondering, like, why haven't we been using Iron Crown all format if it's this good?
And, like, Psychic Steel's not even a bad typing either. I mean, maybe I guess it just took something like Koraidon.
Yeah, like Metagross, Bronzong. We know Psychic Steel is sick.
Yeah, like that's actually really interesting. I didn't even realize that. Metagross, yeah, Bronzong. All those old-fashioned Pokemon. I mean, I guess gifts, it even gets Expanding Force. Expanding Force is one of the most broken moves that we've gotten in recent memory. This thing gets it all, and it's a Futuremon where it gets to get you booster energy,
Yeah.
which is such a unique item. It's a free life orb or a free speed boost. Yeah, why have we been using this, guys?
It does have like some stats, like its stats honestly really aren't so bad, but it's also like there's paradoxes that are like maybe a little bit more obviously broken than it too, like the Flutter Mains, the Iron Hands of the world that like kind of say on the box like, hey, this Pokemon is designed to be pretty strong. You should be using this. Maybe with Crown it took a little bit longer to find, and I think something else that's kind of important to it, I think Indeedee is kind of the secret sauce to Iron Crown. Like if you don't have access to that Expanding Force particularly, just Tachyon Cutter is good, but it's not like Tachyon Cutter and Psychic isn't as good as Tachyon Cutter and Expanding Force. And I think that's the funny thing about this, like a Sun team, not an Electric Train team, but a Sun team is really what's making Iron Crown look this good.
Because you allow a lot of damage to come out too, so you get to play off of the damage that the Iron Crown does as well. And I think Koraidon does a great job at being a good partner to the Iron Crown, allowing you to do a lot of damage in the sun with the collision courses and also boosting up the speed. It's a very fast Pokemon, so pairing with something like the Koraidon makes a lot of sense.
So next game, I definitely think the onus is going to be on Corey to adapt. I think Corey was just like his Pokemon were out of position for a lot of that game. Seung was just keeping up good offensive pressure on him. Is there anything on Corey's side that you think he could be doing to adjust for this next game? I guess I should mention the Pokemon we didn't see last game are Flutter Main making an appearance now, and also a Mystic Water Urshifu.
I mean, we did see the Flutter Main unfortunately just switched into the Tachyon
Oh yeah, Flutter Main. Oh my gosh.
Again, Iron Crown is just making everyone, like, just knocks out everything here on the field. But Corey is going to lead the Flutter Main, which I think is a great decision. Immediately pressure something like the Iron Crown with a Shadow Ball, at least doing a little bit more damage so that Starstorm can finish it off later. Shadow Ball, is super effective. And as you mentioned before, Iron Crown stats aren't crazy. It's just more of its move kit and its typing that, like, kind of makes it good. So going for a Shadow Ball here would make a lot of sense from Corey, even if it's kind of telegraphed. You're also threatening a Moonblast, or excuse me, you're not threatening a Moonblast. Oh wait, no, you are threatening. I misread it twice.
Yeah, it's got both of the great stab moves and two
Shadow
great
Ball.
Support moves.
And it's going into both of the Pokemon here, and it can be super effective. But actually, using the Flutter Main as bait, almost saying, hey, you either have to Terra one of these Pokemon or switch them out, but I'm going to keep my Flutter Main alive because I know how important it is. Then actually switching it to the Incineroar.
Yeah, ooh, Seung just leaving that Koraidon wide open and go for a Flare Blitz, saying, I don't think you're going for a Moonblast. Kind of not taking the bait and being rewarded for it here. Like, having Koraidon fighting against these two Pokemon that I think he's still pretty happy to. Terrapago still taking that opportunity to get up a Calm Mind. One other thing about that turn I want to mention is because Sun was on the field, Flutter Main didn't have to use its booster energy, so if it comes back onto the field and there's no Sun for some reason, maybe cleared by its good friend Terrapagos, it is still going to have that booster energy to give itself that automatic photosynthesis speed boost if it wants.
And that's really good self-awareness from Corey to realize something like that booster energy doesn't go away. A collision course here, going for the Incineroar, just straight up getting rid of it. Wow, goodbye Incineroar, no fake out. I believe the Rocky Helmet, though, going to do a decent amount of chip to the Koraidon. I think Corey's logic there is if it fires off an Incineroar, that's fine. That means I can get a free attack into the Koraidon and potentially knock it out with a +1 star.
Yes, I think this would actually be a really good opportunity to do that and just address this Koraidon, kind of punish this Seung for playing a little bit fast and loose with it. Here's that Star Sword. I don't know if Koraidon can take one of these from half yet. I think Terrapago is a pretty weak Pokemon, but if it didn't do that, like, why would we be using this thing?
Absolutely. And again, that single target is a lot stronger than the spread just because of how the math works out, unfortunately. The Iron Crown is still in the field. Again, I really wanted to touch on that Flutter Main again, switching it out, recognizing that as long as the sun is up, you don't have to commit to the Flutter Main being your lead. You can switch it out and you have that flexibility. The last tool you have to get rid of, though, from Seung's side is that Indeedee, which can redirect those super effective Shadow Balls into the immunity that Indeedee has being a normal type. Ogerpon coming in here for Corey, though, a redirection of their own as Seung switches in Brute Bonnet.
I think something that's interesting about Corey's side is, like, I think the Terrapagos is really well positioned. I think Corey's overjoyed that he dealt with Koraidon this early in the game, but the partners really are not well equipped to deal with this Iron Crown, like, at all. It's a Flutter Main, which we know goes down to one Tachyon Cutter. Ogerpon, we know goes down to one Tachyon Cutter. So I think, like, it really is going to be the Terrapagos, like, trying to carry the torch. Maybe one downside for Terrapagos is before it activates that Terraform 0 turns into its Terraform. It is not going to be doing quite as much to Iron Crown.
Oh, and an Ivy Cudgel there into the Brute Bonnet trying to do some chip just in case you're able to fire up attack with this Terapagos. If it is faster than the Brute Bonnet, we could see a potential knockout here into Seung's Brute Bonnet, but instead another Calm Mind.
Ooh, so Calm Mind here is a little bit gutsy, saying that he doesn't expect Brute Bonnet to go for a Spore due to the pressure of Substitute. Seed Bomb is like, let's see how much this does, because if this does a certain amount, Terapagos is going to have a hard time using Leftovers to recover. I'm not sure if that did enough for 2 Leftovers to, I don't think that Terapagos is going to have Terra Shell back in another turn, so it is going to have to worry about like a full power Tachyon Cutter if it's left open.
It's very close, and now you could just go for a double spiky here. I mean, if Corey does go for a double here, I assume that it's going to be enough for the Terapagos, but doesn't go for it instead. Tachyon Cutter going into that spiky shield instead on Corey's Ogre Pawn, and Starstorm following up. This is going to be potentially a knockout into the Brute Bonnet. That's huge.
Yeah, wow. After just 2 Calm Minds, I was a little bit unsure whether Brute Bonnet would go down. It really is like such a tanky Pokemon. But then again, maybe one like this with the defense booster energy, trained to be like even bulkier on the defensive side. Now, Seung is stuck with his 2 Psychic types together, and that Turtle can just like finally activate its Terra and just remove the Psychic Rain, remove the Sun if it wants to.
Absolutely, you can remove both. Not that the Sun is doing much here for Seung. Corey has found really a great spot in this game to kind of position his Terapagos. Last time let it maybe take a bit too much damage. It does look like it did go to full at the end of that turn though, so getting that Terra Shell back, if you wanted to, you could play it safe and protect it, but knowing that you're faster than the Brute Bonnet, the Starstorm is very, very safe there.
Yeah, I don't know if Seung, without Protect on the Indeedee, can do a whole lot about like Terra Starstorm and something like Cudgel onto the Indeedee. I think last game we saw it do a pretty good chunk of damage. So I think that would turn the game into a, 2 or 3 to 1 advantage in Corey's favor very quickly. And the full HP Flutter Mane in the back with like access to Shadow Ball for this Iron Crown is going to be very tricky to deal with. Unless this Tachyon Cutter can miraculously get rid of the Turtle, which I kind of doubt.
It has 2 chances to critical hit, so with that in mind, we could play around
one more
that.
crit.
One more. Unfortunately, not enough. I do think a critical hit would have definitely 100% done.
Absolutely, because you have to remember, a critical hit would literally like triple the damage there. You have the 50% bonus damage to begin with, and then because you'd also be ignoring the Turtle's +2 special defense boost, that's effectively another 100% extra damage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Terapagos there is able to hang on. The thing is now, though, you do have to follow me with the Ogre Pawn just to make sure you can live the turn. The Psychic here can follow up to maybe, drop the SPDF of the special defense of the Terapagos for the following turn, but you do just kind of need to knock out something. But again, the thing is, Corey still has this Flutter Mane in the back.
Yeah, the Flutter Mane in the back
is
seems like it is capable of locking this up. This is just a really safe follow me to make sure, like, sure, it's going to be attacking on point at the Turtle, but the Ogre Pawn just redirects it every time. Now that we know that the Indeedee is slower than the Terapagos, this is just every time a Starstorm to make sure that there's no more chip damage in play. Unless it's like a substitute for some reason, but I think that would just be like gambling with a Psychic crit.
Yeah, it just seems a little bit unnecessary as you see the Terra Starstorm come out here from Corey into Seung's Pokemon, knocking out this Indeedee and doing, again, a decent amount of chip to Iron Crown. Definitely in range of something like a Shadow Ball or another Starstorm next turn from Corey. And I really like the way that he adjusted this game as well with that Flutter Mane bait on the lead, threatening super effective damage into both of kind of Seung's pivotal Pokemon, the ones that were doing the damage on the team, threatening both of them with a super effective move, which turns out it's pretty good.
Yeah, this was a really well-played game by Corey. I think, like, I'm not even sure if I'd say he did anything like radically different here, but he just got more calls right. I think he gave Seung a lot of chances to get certain plays wrong. Like, let's say making sure that the Terapagos could have been hit by a Spore, but it never was because it was just like, oh, it's very obvious that this could be a Follow Me, this could be a substitute, anything like that. And then those things were just not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see a Terrestrialization last-ditch effort from Seung here, kind of throwing in the towel, knowing it's going to be super effective anyways. Hey, if you live a Shadow Ball, and again, you're able to knock out this Terapagos, and then live another Shadow Ball for the Flutter Mane.
2 Shadow Balls from 1/3? I don't know. Oh.
We have to remember it had Calm Minds.
Oh,
so
Calm Minds,
if you do
right.
live the Shadow Balls, that you have a game, but the Tachyon Cutter does get the knockout there. Maybe that was a high roll.
Oh, that's the thing throwing me off from last game. The Iron Crown had a Calm Mind boost up. That's why the Starstorm damage was that wimpy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, if maybe that was a high roll with the Flutter Mane, we can hope the Iron Crown lives on 1 HP and the Tachyon Cutter can fire out.
Flutter Mane does get to upgrade from Shadow Ball to Moonblast now that it knows it's a Water-type Iron Crown. That's probably a pretty safe combo from Corey.
Absolutely. But that was a really well-played game from both players, and I'm excited to see what Seung does in Game 3.
Yeah, I feel like if I'm Seung, I don't know if I feel like I need to play the game radically different. I think throughout that whole game, Seung had absolutely chances to just get plays right and find himself in a better position, but it just happened to be Corey getting the plays right. Maybe playing a little bit safer with the Koraidon, if anything, could work out a little bit well. I don't think... Usually in restricted matchups like this, I think the first person to lose their restrict is going to be on the back foot a little bit, and that's especially true in something like Terapagos that is weak to fighting type and it wants to play really long games. You are going to feel the absence of your Koraidon if you lose it by turn 2 of the game. Even if it put out pretty impressive damage, it just might not be quite enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just still impressed by the amount of damage this Terapagos, actually the opposite, the Iron Crown is doing. Terapagos I'm a little disappointed in, but I think with enough boost, as Corey showed us there, the Terapagos definitely can put in some work, especially behind a substitute if you can get the spot for it again, or just making Seung respect it. I think both players have a lot of respect for each other in terms of the game, and they played before, so they know how each other play. So going for something like Seed Bomb into a Terapagos instead of a Spore, because you expect Corey to go for a substitute, makes a lot of sense there. And we see a bit of a switch up here from Seung. Corey is going to go with the same lead from Game 2 with the Flutter Mane and Terapagos, and Seung is going to switch it up and trade out Koraidon for a Brute Bonnet and the Iron Crown.
Yeah, this Brute Bonnet Crown lead is pretty interesting. I think... one thing that I was going to mention is this Sun team isn't incredible at knocking out Instant. You really do rely on your Koraidon to do it most of the time. However, because this isn't anything like a Safety Goggles Instant, it can't do anything about coming in on something like a Spore. So this Flutter Mane slot is very, very vulnerable to something like Tachyon Cutter and Spore can both do pretty nasty things to the Flutter Mane slot. So I think the Brute Bonnet might have actually been a specific call out for this lead. I want to say Brute Bonnet could take a Moonblast Starstorm double up. I think we might be about to find out. For what it's worth, I take that back. I'm wrong. If this is a double up, Brute Bonnet is not sticking with us.
And I'm curious if that trade is worth it, though. That Flutter Mane, you really want it to threaten the super effective damage into something like the Iron Crown, unless you're
right. It's so much harder to force a Terra now.
Exactly. We see a substitute, though, avoiding something like that Spore from the Brute Bonnet, and this could be potentially a big turn, as, yeah, we see the Spore come out from the Brute Bonnet there.
I have to imagine that turn probably went about the way Corey was, prepared for it to, making sure that Substitute still catches the Spore. I think that's maybe even better for him than just getting a knockout on the Bonnet. Now it's kind of taking up space on the field. Let's see. So if you're Seung, you could look at plays I don't know, one of Seed Bomb, or maybe even Sucker Punch is enough to break the Substitute from the Terapagos. So you have a couple mind games of oh, can I get away with the Sucker, or is it just going to try and finish me off with a Starstorm or something first? If I'm Iron Crown,
I think realistically, an attack from Corey's Ogre Pond is most likely going to come out to try to finish off the Brute Bonnet. And even if something like Koraidon switches in, that's a little bit of chip to help the Terapagos out. Or we actually see a switch from Corey's Ogre Pond into something like the Incineroar to eat those Tachyon Cutters. The thing is that Seung has kind of used those turns to kind of get free Calm Minds, and that's why we find ourselves doing Tachyon Cutters, doing 50% to an Incineroar. As we see here instead, again, not falling for a Spiky Shield on the Ogre Pond, not letting it follow me and getting the knockout, not even caring if the Incineroar comes in, just getting that Calm Mind. And this is exactly what I was scared of, is Corey goes for a Calm Mind as well, and both players are just kind of setting up these giant special attacking monsters that just tear through the partner slot.
One thing I like about the instant swap in is it's kind of avoiding taking a risk with the Ogre Pond there. I think the Intimidate might be enough to make sure that this doesn't get a substitute break here. Yeah, I think without the Intimidate, it's very possible that would have been a sub break, and now Terapagos just has that extra layer of protection to work with. It's a little bit tough to say what's going to happen now, but if I'm Seung, I still have a Koraidon in the back. I still have probably an Indeedee in the back. I wonder how we're going to deal with this instant. They have to make sure the Terapagos doesn't get totally out of control with these boosts. Like, we don't want it to get, like, let's say a one-shot on the Koraidon would be a really, really unfortunate thing to have.
And no fake out here is actually huge from Corey, alluding to something like a parting shot or even a knockoff into the Iron Crown to do super effective damage. The Tachyon Cutter is going to break the substitute and do a decent amount of damage to Terapagos there as the Starstorm follows up. Again, we know it's been faster than this Brute Bonnet, getting that knockout. No more Spores going to be in play for Seung. And this is going to be a very interesting turn, seeing what this Sentinel wants to do. And it is that knockoff for super effective damage into the Iron Crown.
Yup, but because Iron Crown activated that booster energy as soon as it hit the field, there's no item to knock off and no extra damage to take from knockoff. So, you know, the Iron Crown definitely taking some chip damage there, but not going down yet. The not going down yet is pretty important because now there's a Koraidon that we have to deal with. This Koraidon is looking at a knockout on either Pokemon in the field with a Collision Course right now. I think if the Turtle were to Terra, I still think it would be going down to one of these. Like, I don't exactly remember that calc offhand, but I think, I don't know, maybe the Bold Nature Turtles are able to live one of these after Terra. But the really unique thing about Collision Course is it gets that bonus damage on super effective hits. It just makes it absolutely brutal. Like, even if you think you're lowering a Koraidon's damage, it's very rare that you've lowered it enough that Collision Course can't still get one-shots.
I think without the Sun and the Orcarium Pulse getting that boost on the Koraidon, I think it's a little bit, again, that super effective damage does do a lot for the Koraidon, but unfortunately the Terapagos, like, there's so many multipliers, and again, if it is that bold, we've seen it live worse. To be honest, the Incineroar does switch out, though, for something. For Corey's last Pokemon here, the Ogerpon that we saw before, at full HP is going to be able to eat a hit or two. We do see the Terastallization from Corey, though, and this is going to remove the Sun and turn Starstorm into a spread-type move.
So even if one of, like, let's say the Turtle is able to live, like, one hit of the Collision Course, Seung could just be doubling up on it with, like, Collision Course and Tachyon Cutter. Like, it's just an instant in the field. You don't necessarily have to be going after it. Looks like Seung is more focused on going after the Ogerpon, though. So now we're going to have to figure out, where is this Iron Crown man? Where's Tachyon going?
Ooh, that's definitely not enough. And the thing about this is, because you still have starting on your Ogerpon, because before when Tachyon Cutter was hitting it, you were able to break the starting on the Ogerpon and get the knockout. The thing is, because Koraidon is faster than your Iron Crown, you can only go for an attack, and it has to go into the Ogerpon and before the Tachyon Cutter gets to even touch the Terapagos. So this is a bit scary here. I will say, though, the Terapagos is low enough HP. Not getting that knockout on the Iron Crown is kind of big, considering that Tachyon Cutter could just knock out this Terapagos before he gets to move anyways.
Yeah, and it looked like Seung has a pretty safe way to make sure he's not getting hit by attacks this turn, like Collision Course into Ogerpon. You know, Koraidon outruns it, make sure that there's no Ivy Cudgels coming out, and then Tachyon. We saw that it's going to be capable of knocking out the Terapagos from this range. Instant swapping in for it is a valiant effort. Oh, I think the goal here is to make it so that Seung, if this is a spiky shield on Ogerpon, this is going to make it a little bit harder for the Koraidon to deal with it the next turn.
And I kind of like that. You also have Fake Out to potentially knock out something like the Iron Crown. I don't think it does because it is resisted as a steel type.
I think at 9 HP it would go down, but... Yeah. You know, there's no way to remove Psychic Trade, and I think we've seen that Seung has that Indeedee in the back here.
Yeah, and with something like Koraidon attacking into that Ogerpon, takes a little bit from that Rocky Helmet. Let's see if Seung keeps in the Koraidon or switches in the Indeedee. This is a very risky play if you don't switch in the Indeedee here. I like this a lot. The Iron Crown, yes, you lose the booster, yes, you lose the Calm Mind boost, but you are able to do damage with the Koraidon. The Iron Crown, you really, I think, is your end game piece here. You need to do a lot of damage with it. Koraidon, you're going to eventually be attacking into potentially Spiky Shields or the Incineroar with the Rocky Helmet, so this could be a little dangerous. No, switch in, Spiky Shield, tries to go for the double. What did Incineroar go for though?
So just a double protect from Seung. So the Instant's still going to be on the field. That almost feels like we're kind of playing a game of chicken here. The Ogerpon getting that redemption of the protecting move after that Spiky Shield failed means that the Ogerpon, if it wants a Spiky Shield this turn, it is always going to be able to succeed. I think it makes sense if you're Koraidon to go for something like this collision course on the instant slot.
Yeah, absolutely, because if it follows me, the Ogerpon follows me, that's fine as well. If you don't, you get a knockout. And unfortunately, the Ogerpon Cornerstone here from Corey isn't threatening much damage onto the field here. Even into an Indeedee, it's not doing too much damage that's anything notable that Seung maybe needs to take note of. We are going to see the Indeedee get that special defense boost, though. Not that it matters. Actually, maybe against the Tropicos later in the game.
Yeah.
Collision course though, no follow me, able to target down in that Incineroar and definitely get the knockout there.
Yeah, so the Rocky Helmet damage, like, the Koraidon looks like it's in pretty dire straits, and it is in pretty dire straits. It could pretty easily go down to something like an Ivy Cudgel here. However, you have to remember, and it's not actually an Ivy Cudgel for the Koraidon, Psychic Train is here to stay, and I think that Expanding Force at this point, I think this Turtle's... without the booster energy in play, I have to assume Terapagos is still going down to one of these. Like, if you're Seung here, what's stopping you from just, like, spamming Collision Course on the Turtle and then, like, redirecting? It looks like we might have seen him click something like a Psychic into the Indeedee. I think Seung has the edge here if he just keeps up the offensive pressure, essentially.
Absolutely. I think the perfect turn here for Corey is something like the Protect on the Tropicos, knowing that the Collision Course has to go into that slot, and getting an Ivy Cudgel into the Indeedee, and then you have the 2v2 again at the end of the game, and then you can redirect it and hope you live an attack, but it's pretty dire for Corey here. Having to switch out the Tropicos and having to get rid of those boosts is really, really scary. The Spiky Shield, though, is going to be the move of choice for Corey here. And Collision Course is just going to Tropicos, and I think that's going to be game there for Seung and Corey.
Yeah, I think even if Corey, like, approached that endgame a little bit differently, I'm pretty sure he would have had to say that he was going to be capable of living one of those Expanding Forces with a relatively low HP Turtle. Admittedly, just not a calc that I know offhand, and especially with the way so many of these Turtles are running the Bold Nature for extra defense, maybe not really expecting to take one of these Iron Crown Expanding Forces in the endgame, it might have been impossible for Corey to come back at that point anyway.
Yeah, a lot of the time they assume that because if they get Calm Mind boosts, they just need to go bold. They only need to worry about their defenses. And that makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, if you're playing against Seung, you have a Iron Crown and Indeedee you have to worry about, as well as a super effective fighting move from the Koraidon in the Collision Course, which, as you mentioned before, does even more against super effective targets.
One thing both players were doing really well this game is kind of knowing when, even after investing resources in a Pokemon like Calm Mind boosts or a booster energy item or anything like that, they still know when to swap those Pokemon out. Sometimes, like, kind of throwing away your boosts or your investments can be worth it if that's, like, a valuable Pokemon and you need to reposition it for another time.
But GG's to both of our players there. Seung and Corey played amazingly. Both of them played amazingly well today, too, as well. They, again, both made finals of the last Collector's Emporium Cup event thing. But they are amazing, and they both deserve to be in top 8. We are going to immediately jump into our next game very soon, but without a little bit of a preview of both of our players as well.